Welcome to today's Sihasin Hour. I'm here as your host, Ethel Branch, Executive Director of Yeha El Nido. I have my co-host here, Patrocinio Lamakohu, and we have some wonderful guests here with us today. We have Marc Johnson and Alex Chang from Northwestern Mutual. They're going to provide us some pointers on personal financial planning, AKA Financial Literacy 101. So we're really excited to have you guys here. I'm going to go ahead and introduce myself to our viewers, and if you guys could introduce yourselves as well. And then I'd like you to talk a little bit about your background and how you ended up in this position with Northwest Mutual. So if we have any young listeners and are curious about how to break into this type of a career, then they have a little background on that. And then Marc, especially coming from the nation, from our community, you just have such a great story, and I'd love for our listeners to hear that. So, Ethel Branch and Che. Nakai Bashichin, Senegeni Dashache, Do Nakai Dashanala, Sezizi Denasha, and I'm speaking to you from the base of Doko Swede here in Flagstaff. I'm originally from Loop, also born and raised on the nation, and I'm just happy to have you guys here. So, Marc, do you want to introduce yourself briefly?
Sure. Thank you, Ethel. Yate, She, Marc Johnson, Ashihi, Nishle, Todachini, Bashishin, Bitagni, Dasha Che, Do Klizilani, Dashanale. Again, I am speaking to you from the financial district in San Francisco, California, where I am a financial advisor with Northwestern Mutual. I'm proud to report that I work in the iconic Transamerica Pyramid Building in the financial district. We certainly have some amazing views of the Bay. A background about myself, quick background about myself. As Ethel said, I'm originally from the Navajo Reservation, from the Upper Fruitland, New Mexico area. I graduated from Kirtland Central High School 30 years ago. Go Broncos! This year's, it's kind of crazy. We're gonna have our 30-year reunion, so that's something to look forward to. I enlisted in the Army in 1994. What was supposed to be a 6-year stint as a microbiologist. That turned into a 23-year career. Most of the time serving as a microbiologist, a couple of times in the logistics side of the medical, and blood banking and chemistry. All of this was done in a hospital environment. There was some field environments that I did run into, which was in Colombia, South America, and also Okinawa, Japan, Seoul, South Korea, and all over the United States. After my retirement in 2016, my wife and I moved here to San Francisco for me to attend school. I got my hotel management degree in 2019 from City College of San Francisco. In 2021, I attained my finance degree from San Francisco State University. Immediately after graduating, my dream job basically called me up here in San Francisco at Northwestern Mutual. They offered me the opportunity to work with a Fortune 100 company. I took the job. And as I continued on, I saw, working with Alex Chang, who's going to be talking here in a couple of minutes, is the opportunity to give back to my community. It's setting the example for my daughter, and also, for her too, is just my whole family, giving back to the community. Herself, she works for Austin football club. She's the director of youth development there. After graduating from Harvard University, her and her best friend, they started a nonprofit there in Austin with the goal of serving the underserved people there, mostly the Latino community. Prior to COVID, their nonprofit got picked up by the Major League Soccer team, Austin FC, and they haven't looked back. And for myself, I also am within the San Francisco community. I am part of the Rotary Club of San Francisco, where I mentor. I'm in a program called Action Leadership Program with students, where I mentor 2 San Francisco high school students. Their goal is to raise money using their physical fitness to combat the homelessness problem here. So yeah, so it's it's all about giving back to the community, no matter what. So for me, right now I'll turn it over to Alex. He'll explain a lot more, and we'll go from there.
Perfect. Thank you there, Marc. Again, my name is Alexander Chang. Like Marc said, I'm one of his partners here at Northwestern Mutual. Just a little background on myself. Growing up just here in the Bay Area, my main goal in life was really always to become a doctor, to take an oath to really save lives there and be able to help people in that way. Just going through my entire college career at USC down in Los Angeles there, it just kind of became something that I wasn't really sure about anymore. And I decided that, I wanted to move into economics and business there, because I was surrounding myself with a lot of similar people who were, again, in that kind of business mindset. So I decided to switch my major halfway through college to econ and business. I finished my degree in Los Angeles at USC. And after coming back home to San Francisco, I started my career at Northwestern Mutual. And again, I haven't looked back since. It's been a ride of a lifetime. And really, in terms of why I'm so passionate about the work that I'm doing, I come from a background where, we weren't the wealthiest. My family was always able to provide really great opportunities for me, but, we're not by any means, people with a huge trust fund with millions of dollars in the bank or anything like that. We're just a normal family there. And just seeing my own parents and kind of the way that they've been able to save over time, it kind of it broke my heart a little bit, because, they're still working today and not able to retire because they didn't know about financial planning, and they didn't know about some of the things that they were able to do. So similarly to Marc, my main mission and my main goal is to always be able to give back to the communities that we're working in, and be able to show people and teach people what's possible. And help people essentially kind of level up and understand the different ways that we can save for the future, and make sure that we're taking care of our families, hitting all of our goals, retiring at the right time, paying as little tax as possible as well, since, we all can agree that taxes are just going to keep going up in the future there, right? So again, we want to just be able to help out, and give as much financial literacy and knowledge as we can, back to the community here on the Navajo Nation.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for your introductions and that little bit of background. Well, we're excited for your presentation. I know you have a PowerPoint. And just so our listeners know, you can put your questions in the live chat on Facebook Live. And our team here will be happy to address those questions. And then I think we're going to have some time at the end as well for any final questions, right?
Absolutely there, Ethel. Perfect. So without further ado, let me go ahead and share my screen here, and we'll be able to get started on the presentation today. Perfect. All righty. So again, Marc and I are going to go over our financial 101 here today. It's our financial basics essentially, and it's going to give everyone a really good idea of just some starting points of where we can get started with just thinking about retirement, thinking about the future, and really with the main emphasis on thinking about our goals there. So we'll go ahead and get started here today. So what we always like to start off with is really just asking everyone a question, and feel free to just think about this in your head there. But what do you want for your future? And the reason we want to ask something like this is because when it comes to financial planning, it's really important to understand what everyone is looking for on an individual level. Because once you know what you want, that's going to really help us as financial professionals help you plan to get there, right? So again, just take a couple seconds here to really think about what it is that you want to achieve in the short term and the long term. Maybe that's buying a house, maybe that's saving for retirement, maybe it's sending our kids to college in the future there. Whatever it is, hold on to those goals. And again, really, really start to think about them there and keep them top of mind. Perfect. So when it comes to financial planning, really 5 main topics typically come to mind. So the first thing is always going to be savings. Second is going to be spending. Third is going to be growth. Fourth is going to be protection. And fifth is going to be giving. So we're going to start our conversation here today, really just talking about savings, and we'll go around and hit all 5 topics there. Perfect. So when it comes to saving, it's one of the most important things to do with financial security, because it helps you build up the funds to cover your goals and all the different surprises that life likes to throw our way. It also really helps to make sure you're able to afford all the things that you want in life and the lifestyle that you want to live, and the things that you're going to want today and tomorrow. And these are all really important things, of course. But when it comes to savings, right, we aren't able to save every single penny that we make. That's just not possible, because there's always going to be bills. There's always going to be things, external forces that come into our life that are going to take up some of those savings. So when it comes to that, we need to think about how much we need to save now, because that's going to be a really big component in making sure we're planning the right way. So when it comes to savings here, the general rule of thumb is that we want to allocate about 20% of your gross income towards everything that we're doing there for savings and investing. But again, that 20% is that general guideline. So everyone's life is going to be a little bit different there. So it's definitely a flexible number, but again, the ideal goal is to save about 20%. So again, when it comes to saving for these different goals, it's really important that we be as specific as possible, because again, let's just use buying a home as an example. We want you to get as specific as possible with this goal, because that's going to give us as close as possible to a finite number that we can save for. So when it comes to that home purchase, right, let's take a look at, how many rooms are we looking for? What kind of amenities are we looking for? Do we want a garage? Do we want a backyard? Do we want a front lawn, a porch? Whatever it is about this dream home that we're looking to be able to purchase, I want you to be able to note down and put pen to paper, right? Really get a hard understanding of what we're trying to achieve here. And that's, again, going to allow us to figure out exactly what price we're going to be looking for based off of that goal. And that'll tell us, again, how much we need to save for that down payment. Or if, again, we're trying to hit this goal in the next 5 years, what do we need to do to get there? So again, the more detail you bring to the table, the better off we're going to be, because that just allows us to hone in on what we're looking for as much as possible there. Another really great thing to ask everyone here today is, do you have an emergency fund, right? And what does that emergency fund really mean? A lot of times when it comes to an emergency fund, if we're looking at the statistics, 39% of Americans today aren't able to pay for a $400 unexpected expense without using a credit card. And that's really significant, because again, that's where our emergency fund comes into place. The general rule of thumb for that emergency fund is that we want to have you saving about 6 months of your current expenses inside of a bank account at all times. That is really going to make sure that, again, we're taking care of all of those unexpected expenses there, right? It's so critical, because again, there's always going to be things like car repairs, vet bills, an unexpected trip to an ER, a family emergency, whatever it is that comes up. If we don't have to necessarily use a credit card to fund this kind of purchase or expense, that can be very favorable for us moving forward. Because again, when it comes to credit cards and things like that, they kind of give us a little bit of a false sense of security there, because we have this spending limit. But if we max that limit out, that's not really real money, because unfortunately we have to pay that money back. So a lot of times when we don't have the right emergency fund in place, that's when we start to run into kind of that credit card interest rate trap, right? Where we're not able to just fund these different kind of expenses with our bank account, and we're left to rely heavily on credit cards to cover any expenses there. And again, those interest rates on credit cards can be as high as 20% a year sometimes, right? 25%. And when you have high balances on that credit card, 25% interest over a year is a very, very high amount of interest to be paying. And your minimum payments can be eaten up by interest alone. So again, having the right kind of emergency fund in place is going to be absolutely crucial for just a financial planning standard there. Perfect. So before we move into the next section here, again, feel free to throw any questions into the chat. Again, we want to be able to answer any questions that come up and make sure that we're understanding all the different topics that we're going over today. Perfect.
Hey, Alex, can you talk a little bit more about the interest rate trap? So like, say, you're like, okay, I have this credit card. I really want these cool Nike shoes that are like $125. Let's say $100. So you're like, I'm just going to borrow from this temporarily and I'll pay it back later at some point. If you don't pay that off in a year, then like those are actually $125 shoes. And if you don't pay them in 2 years, but there's compounding interest as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk maybe a little bit about that?
Yeah, you're 100% right. So when it comes to the credit card, right, it's not necessarily a bad thing to use a credit card, because when you use your credit card, it's building up your credit history, and that's going to give you your credit score, right? And the credit score can be anything from about 300 to 850 there. So 850 is the top, so that's essentially perfect credit. And the higher that score is, the better off your credit's going to look. So it makes your life a lot easier when it comes to being able to get qualified for good loans and getting qualified to buy your property, get a car loan, all that kind of stuff. With good credit, you get better interest rates, and that's a given. So in that example, when you're thinking about buying that pair of shoes, right, it's great to be able to make that purchase, of course. But if we don't pay the credit card back, like you were saying there's compounding interest on any kind of purchase we make with a credit card. And let's just use that 25% example again there. So essentially the way the credit card interest works is an APR. So it's a interest rate per year. So that 25% is broken up over every single month. So that comes out to about 2% a month that gets added back on to your overall balance. And if we're not paying that off, like you said there, Ethel, at the end of the year with interest alone, that $100 now turned into actually more than $125 because that interest is compounding on itself. So the first month, it'll be 2% of 100, which is $2 that gets added on to how much you owe back, right? Doesn't really feel like the biggest deal there. It's only $102 instead of 100, right? But now the next month after that, it's not just taking 2% of $100. It's taking 2% now of $102. So now what gets added on top of that is even more. And the longer we hold balance on our credit cards without paying it off, the more and more that interest continues to add up, and the more and more that interest continues to compound on itself in a negative way.
So
again,
I mean, you're paying interest on interest at a certain point.
Exactly, 100% correct.
You don't want to do that. I mean,
exactly. So you're paying interest on interest, and that's where we start to run into that trap there, because the interest that gets added on every single month, if we don't pay it off, if your balance is super, super high, say, for example, you're holding a $10,000 debt on your credit card there, the interest that you're going to get on that at 2% is very high. That's going to be a lot of interest, right? It's going to be about $200 of interest. Let's say that your minimum monthly payment was $300. If you paid $300 into your credit card bill, but $200 got added back on as interest, when you look at it in reality, you only dropped your credit card balance by $100, even though you yourself put in $300. So that's where that credit card trap comes into play. It starts to eat away the money that we're putting back into it. So we need to start getting super aggressive to be able to get out of that trap, essentially. So again, credit cards are not necessarily a bad thing, right? A lot of credit cards give you points, they give you cash back and stuff like that. I myself use credit cards, but at the same time, I got to remember that, hey, just because I have a balance here that I can use doesn't mean I necessarily should. So again, it's all about using the credit cards in the right way where you're able to build credit, but not get stuck in that interest rate trap there. Perfect. I hope that's that was able to answer that question. Awesome.
Yeah, thanks so much, Alex.
Absolutely. So moving into the next.
Alex, real quick.
Oh, yes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
Alex, just a real quick about, kind of going backwards a little bit, about the emergency fund. And, I tell the story, Alex, you've heard it, where last year, how instrumental my emergency fund was in my wife and I's life. It got us through a rough year last year, with my wife losing her job here in in San Francisco in the tech industry. Her income was gone in March of last year. Through a phone call, it was gone. We had to, use this emergency fund in order for us. I didn't have a job. I was still in school. We had about 6 more months for us to, for me, until I started receiving my first paycheck here at Northwestern Mutual. So yes, the planning we did 5 years ago with my financial advisor saved us last year. If it wasn't there, I don't know what would have happened. Alex has heard the story many times, but yeah, the emergency fund is very instrumental in maintaining anyone's lifestyle when something detrimental happens to them. Thank you, Alex.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that there, Mark. Perfect. So moving into our next.
I mean, just to add to that, but like right now, especially during the pandemic, I mean, we just don't know, right? Like businesses are folding. You might get COVID and be out, or you might get long COVID. And so having that emergency fund right now, I think, is particularly important.
You're 100% right. And one thing just to touch on that as well is when we don't have the emergency fund, right? Credit cards aren't the only things that can give us income that can, help to pay for bills and stuff like that. One thing that we've run into a lot with many of our clients here, especially during this pandemic, is after these kind of things have happened, the thing that's even scarier is we've run into a lot of our clients liquidating their retirement funds to cover their bills. So again, if we don't have the right amount of money in the bank to supplement our lifestyle for the next 6 months there, where are we going to get that money? First thing, it's easiest to always pull from credit cards. Second thing is we're going to most likely have to start liquidating retirement funds. And, up front, it might not feel like the biggest deal, but when we start looking long term, if we're taking out our retirement fund to, be able to fund a car purchase or pay for any bills there or anything like that, the future you is the one who's going to be hurting there more. Because up front, it feels like, okay, great, I can pull my 401k out and I have money to spend. But in the future, the future Alex is not going to have that 401k anymore if I pull it out. So when my income stops in the future, right, where am I going to get that money from if I don't have that 401k saved and I'm too old to be able to continue working there, right? So we want to make sure that we have all the right kind of things in place to make sure, we're staying financially secure throughout all of the different stages of our life there. Perfect.
Thank you.
So we're going to move into talking about spending now. Because again, spending is one of the easiest things to do. I love to spend. Everyone loves to spend. We all love to go shopping, of course. But now we're going to talk about essentially the ways that we can track it and the ways that we can, make sure we have enough money to cover what we need to cover versus what we owe and versus what we want to buy for ourselves. Awesome. All righty here. So when it comes to tracking our expenses, it's something that's pretty easy to do. Essentially, what we want to do is start by taking an inventory of all the different ways that we're spending money. There's a lot of essentially what we want to do is start by. There's a lot of apps out there today that can really help you track the way that you're spending. There's apps like Mint and stuff like that, Acorns, all of those kind of things really help to itemize, if we're spending on groceries, if we're spending on dining out, spending on clothes, right? Whatever it is we're buying, there's apps that can do that. You can also do it a little more old school and have a budgeting worksheet. Mark and I are happy to provide any budgeting worksheets to people in attendance today if they want to take a look at those and be able to put kind of pen to paper there and see it physically in front of you. But essentially, what we want to do is to be able to track all of that there, right? And after you track it, we want you to compare that to our guideline. So when it comes to spending, there's a general guideline. Again, it's 20-60-20. And what that really means, to break that down, is 20% of our money, we want to see that saved. So before we spend it even on our bills, right? Before we spend it on rent, mortgage, car insurance, all that kind of stuff, we want to save 20%. We went into that savings a little bit earlier. So we should be spending about 60% of our money on our fixed expenses there. So that's going to come out to things like car insurance, like I mentioned earlier, our mortgage, our rent, paying for our phone bill, paying our utilities to keep the lights on, paying for food to keep food on the table for our families. So that's essentially for your necessary household expenses. We don't really have a choice but to spend for certain things in our life, right? So that should be only up to about 60% there. And provided we save the right way and we keep our fixed expenses in check, that last 20% of our money, we actually want you to be able to spend it on yourself, doing the things that you love to do there. One thing about that 60% as well is, again, that's kind of our price ceiling. So if you do your budget and you see that your fixed expenses are coming out to more than 60% of your normal take-home pay, that's where we need to start really thinking about what we have going on, and we need to reallocate our budget there. Because if we're spending 70% on our fixed expenses here in the middle, then that's taking out of our savings, or that's taking out of our ability to spend on ourselves. So again, this guideline does fluctuate for certain individuals. People with families, of course, children are very, very expensive there. They take a lot of, they're expensive in terms of physical money. They're expensive in terms of time as well. So, if our fixed expenses are a little bit higher while we have some young children around, that's totally fine as well. But again, ideally, we want to stay in this 20-60-20 and make sure that we're staying within our means, essentially. And the way this kind of tracks back to our credit cards is those credit cards can give us kind of that false sense of reality again when it comes to this 20-60-20, because it's like, oh, I've already spent my 20%, but my credit card limit has an additional 2,000 there. Let me go swipe the card and we can go buy some more stuff there, right? If we're getting out of that 20% for ourselves and having to add that onto the credit cards now, that's where, again, we need to make sure we're taking a step back and reevaluating what we're doing there, and really making a decision on whether or not this is something that we need versus something that we want. And again, maybe we need to push out buying that new computer for a month or two, so we save a little bit more, so we don't have to add as much onto a credit card, right? It's all a conversation to be had, but it's important that we're thinking about these kind of things. Because again, if we're not thinking about them, that's how we fall into these different kind of traps there. And that's how we get through a couple months and we see that, oh my God, almost all of a sudden those credit cards are maxed out. We don't know what happened, right? So again, really good idea to keep all of this kind of stuff top of mind there. Again, just wanted to throw a question out to the group. Are there any questions about spending in general, and anything like that there?
I just want to add, one thing I noticed was happening with my credit cards. I try to not use them because I'm not a responsible user of credit cards. But I noticed that, like with Amazon, I'm constantly losing my debit card. And so I switched some of my Amazon transactions to my credit card, because like, well, that's never going to change, right? Because I don't use that. I don't. And then I kind of forgot about it. And then I went back and looked at my credit card balance, and I was like, oh, wow, it's different than what I expected. And it was because all of these transactions I had set like my Hulu subscription to it or something. But those things had built up over time. So just a reminder to, even if you're not really using your credit cards, make sure you're monitoring their balance, and your subscriptions are in control.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and to piggyback on top of that as well there, when it comes to credit cards, it's always important to take a look at your statements there, because with that, with credit cards, it's especially in a digital age, we can kind of lose those credit cards. People can take that credit card information and use it to purchase things that we don't want them to without our discretion. So for that kind of stuff, it's really important to make sure that, hey, anything that's charged on that credit card was charged from you and not someone else who stole your credit card information. So it kind of goes hand in hand with making sure we're monitoring everything there. Perfect. Let me see here. So we have a couple questions in the chat. So first question here is, what does responsible credit spending look like in terms of building your credit rating? Awesome. That was a great question there. So taking a look at spending on your credit card to help build your credit there, right? It's not anything that you have to do too crazily on. Even swiping something as little as, a coffee at Starbucks every day, right? Being able to do something small like that and then paying it off is going to build your credit. The credit card companies essentially want to see you using it. So you can get a credit card, but if you just leave it in your wallet and you never spend on it, it's not going to build your credit for you. The way that you're building your credit is that you're building up that history of transactions and payments. So that's how the credit card companies grade you essentially on, how credit worthy are you. So it's always good to spend a little bit on them, right? So again, maybe that's only spending $50 a month on the credit card and paying it off. So you don't get crazy with it, but you're still building the history, right? Maybe that's, if we're able to, maybe that's spending a little more there too. For me personally, what I usually do, just for my business as well, is I charge everything on my credit card, but I make sure that I pay it off every month as well in full. So I'm building up a lot of points on my credit card. So I use those for cash back. I use those for traveling as well. But I make sure that I'm never leaving a crazy amount of balance. I never have more than $100 left over on my credit card every month there. So that's why it's really important to make sure we're on top of the way that we're spending and on top of paying those back. So again, when it comes to building that credit, you don't have to be crazy with it. You can just do, small transactions here or there. Maybe we go out to eat with our friends. Absolutely feel free to swipe the credit card at that point in time and then pay it off at the end of the month, right? Does that answer your question there?
Alex, I have another question on that. So I use Credit Karma, and it lets me know like your score's improving. Oh, it declined. It tracks my credit score and also my FICO score. And I got a message recently saying, commenting on my credit utilization. So I think it was saying like, we recommend, or having a 30% utilization rate is helpful for your credit rating or something like that. I thought that was interesting. And can you say a little bit more about that, like the credit utilization rate?
Yeah, absolutely. So when it comes to your credit score, it's not just based on how much you use your credit cards and how much you're swiping and paying off. So first thing that's taken into account is your payments. So if you're paying your bills on time, basically, right? If you're missing payments at all, or if you're paying them late, that's going to really heavily negatively affect that score. So make sure first thing is always paid on time. Another metric they use is how long you've had credit. So I started building my credit when I was 17 years old. I got my first credit card at 17. So the longer you're building your credit, the better your score is going to look. Because for someone who's had credit for 1 year versus someone who's had credit building for 20 years, when you go to the bank and you're trying to get a loan there, who looks better, right? If you've had on-time payments for 20 years, you're going to look a lot better than someone who's only had credit for 1 year there, right? So the length of time you're building credit is important. Third, the number of accounts you open is important. So say, for example, you try to open 5 different credit cards at the same time, that's going to negatively impact your score. So you don't want to do more than 1 to 2 inquiries every couple of years there. Because when the credit card company sees you opening 5 credit cards at the same time, they're thinking, hey, what's going on with Alex's situation? Why did he just, in the span of 1 month, put in 5 credit card applications? Is there something going on his end? Does he have a lot more debt than he's telling us that is making him trying to, open all these cards? So that negatively affects it. What you mentioned there as well, Ethel, is really important. It's talking about your credit utilization. So let's say that we have $1,000 limit here, right? If you're using the right amount, that's going to be 30% or less. That's going to be up to $300 of your credit limit used, right? Because that's 30% of the 1,000. If your credit card limit's at 1,000 and now you've spent $900 on it, you've used 90% of your credit, right? So that negatively affects your credit because now you've effectively used too much. And that makes the credit card company a little more worried because now they're charging you more interest and it's harder to pay off a $900 balance compared to a $300 balance. So just to use myself as an example, in terms of overall credit, I have about a $50,000 limit for what I'm able to spend with my credit cards personally. So if we're looking at 30% there, we can go ahead and do a quick calculation on that. So I can't, to not affect my credit score, I have to keep my spending at anything lower than 15,000. So I can spend more than 15,000, of course, but if I get too crazy with it, and let's say that, you know, I want to buy 10 MacBooks for my family members or something like that, right? If I did something like that and I was over that 30% limit, then that would affect my credit score and make it go down because I'm spending too much there. I would say on the utilization side, it doesn't affect your credit score as much because again, let's say that you're spending that 900 on $1,000 limit, but you pay that 900 off every month. So that's not going to affect you there then, right? So it really depends. It starts to become more apparent when we're leaving balance on our card and we're kind of falling into that interest rate trap again.
Yeah, and I just want to also understate the importance of making your payments on time. I personally have most of my bills with set up to automatic pay. There was one credit card that I wasn't able to set that up with. And you know, I'm so busy. I don't always remember. And so I had a late payment and I had like the highest kind of FICO score you can have. And because of that one late payment, I lost 100 points and I went from like outstanding FICO score or exceptional FICO score to just a good FICO score. And I was wanting to, you know, refinance my house. And it's like, oh my gosh, this is like the worst possible time for one $39 payment. So I just want to overemphasize that it is extremely important because the late payment can be very damaging to your credit score.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Another question here in the chat. For folks living in border towns, what advice would you give to be more tax savvy? So in terms of taxes there, right? Taxes are going to be something that we're going to be paying forever. There's nothing we can do to fully ever avoid the IRS unless you never work like a normal job, and that, you know, if we received money from our parents for the rest of our life, then technically, you know, you wouldn't have to pay taxes there, right? But for most people, if we're working, we're paying taxes, right? We go to the grocery store, if we buy anything, you'll notice there's most likely sales tax at the end of that, right? So there's always going to be some aspect of our life that is involved in taxes there. So even for people who are living in border towns, right? If you're a little bit further away from kind of big cities and stuff like that or anything there, when it comes to taxes and savings in general, you know, we want to start thinking about the best places to start saving money to combat that tax. Because if you're putting all of your money into just a bank account, right? Here's one thing about the bank account that you're not going to hear from the bank because they don't want you to know this, is that the interest rate they give you is very, very, very low, right? Your major banks today, they're probably giving you 0.01, maybe 0.02% interest every single year, which is a thousandth of a dollar, right? So you're basically getting pennies, right? I looked at my bank account the other day and the interest I got was 12 cents. Absolutely blew my mind. And it's like, what am I even doing leaving my money in the bank sometimes? And then again, leave money in the bank, not saying the bank's a bad thing. But the crazy thing is that 12 cents of interest that I got, basically a dime, I have to pay full income tax on. So I'm paying basically 30-something% tax on that dime. So realistically, the IRS cuts that dime up and I only walk away with 7 cents, right? So 7 little pennies there. So when it comes to taxes, we need to really be conscious of what's happening and the different ways that our money's getting taxed. And then now we need to think about the ways where we can put that money to use in the right kind of environment where you don't pay taxes on. So one of those places is something called the Roth IRA. The Roth IRA is a retirement account that people can get started. You may or may not have heard of this account before, but the really amazing thing about it is when you're investing money into that account, it's going to grow we can put that money to use inside of the stock market and stuff like that. And that money is going to be fully tax-free growth and fully tax-free when you pull it out in the future. So it's not out of the question to say, hey, if we're starting out in our career, if we're putting, you know, $500 or $6,000 a year into that account and maxing it out every year, by the time we hit retirement, it's not out of the question to say you can have 7 figures and have over $1 million inside of that account. It might sound a little crazy, like, oh my God, how do I become a millionaire, right? I would say, again, it sounds crazy, but if you plan the right way, the only things you need to have wealth in the future, especially in a great account like the Roth IRA, is you need time on your side and you need consistency. As long as we're consistent with the way that we save and invest, getting to the future and having lots of money there to supplement our lifestyle is going to be a lot easier than many people will think. It's not impossible. And it took a long time for me to understand that as well. We'll talk about that in a second when we move into the next section here, but making sure we're growing our money the right way and keeping that tax conversation in mind is going to be absolutely crucial for the future there. And we'll dive into that in a second. I saw there was one more question just about FICO scores and tax and credit score. So the FICO score and the and your credit score, they're very, very similar. The main difference there is that they're looking at different things, right? Your credit score, we kind of went over what they're looking at there. Your FICO score is looking more at like some other things like how much you're spending and stuff like that there. So essentially the same score. I wouldn't really, if you have a good credit score, 9 out of 10 times you have a good FICO score. And the credit score and the FICO score are rated very similarly. So I wouldn't worry too heavily about either of them. Just keep them both in mind. The credit score tends to be a little easier to see because most credit cards will give you a free credit score tool that you can look at. And then on TransUnion, Experience and all that kind of stuff, they're basically credit rating companies. So there's going to be your 3 main main credit rating companies there, and they're going to be the ones that rate your credit score. So you might see Experian gives you like a 700 credit score, but TransUnion might give you a 710 score, right? So they'll be a little bit different, but they'll usually be very close in the score that they give you, even if there's a little fluctuation between all 3 there. But they're all looking at the same stuff. They just kind of weight things a little bit differently. TransUnion might weight the credit length a little heavier than Experian might. I'm not entirely sure how they do that because that's kind of all their internal stuff, but it's all going to generally be the same within a good range of itself there.
And Alex, you can actually request your credit score from all 3 rating agencies once a year for free, right?
Yes, that is correct. So you can put in an inquiry to any of those 3 companies and say you want to pull your credit score for free. And they'll be able to send that over to you. They'll give you all the information and everything there. Your credit cards too typically will have a score tracker that you can take a look at there and see that whenever you would like. And it gives you a pretty accurate estimation of what your credit is looking like there.
And then on the Roth IRA, just talking about IRAs, and I'm sure you're going to go into that a little bit more. But one thing, especially young professionals should pay attention to is your employee match. Like if you put in $5,000, your employer may match that up to a certain amount. And that's basically free money for your retirement, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
that's correct.
Pay attention to that.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. We'll go into that in a second here. And we'll talk about 401ks and everything like that as well. Perfect. So next thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about growing our money. This is one of the most exciting things to talk about here since it's really wealth building, right? It's accumulation, it's exciting, it's stock market, it's all this kind of really great stuff there. So really what we want to do is making sure we're putting that money in the right places. And when it comes to growth, 9 out of 10 times, the first thing people are going to think about is investments. So we'll talk about all that right now. Perfect. So let me go ahead and move to the next thing here. So when we're thinking about investing, again, the earlier we start, the better off we're going to be, especially for the long term, right? Saving toward down payments, your child's education, for retirement, all that kind of stuff is going to be made easier if we save earlier. You know, if we start saving at 20 years old, we're going to have a lot more money than if we start saving at 50, right? Again, so the earlier, the better, because that's the way we take advantage of compounding interest in the positive way. So for debt, compounding interest works against you. It's bad compounding interest. But for growth, compounding interest works with you because it's money working on itself. It's interest making more money for you there. So that's what we really want to take advantage of. So what we're showing you here is a different hypothetical situation. So let's say if you're 45 years old and you take a look at the screen here, right, for investor C. So investor C is 45 and they're going to be investing from 45 to 65. And we're going to just say hypothetically that they're going to invest $100 every single month. And let's just say for simplicity's sake as well, that investor C is going to be making 6% interest growth every single year. So again, if you invest $100 and you made 6%, you made $6 of growth there, right? So looking at this here, for investor C, they can double their money by the time they turn 65 years old. So over that next 20-year period, you would double your money. And the thing that's really important to see here is if you look at investor B now, investor B is saving 10 years earlier at the age of 35 and investing the same way, $100 a month, getting 6% a year. By the time investor B turns 65, you're making 3x return on your money. So you're tripling your money there. And the more important thing is if you go one step back again for investor A is starting at 25 years old, doing that exact same strategy. And by the time investor A turns 65 in the next 40 years, investor A has quadrupled their money. So 4x their money there, right? So when you're looking at that, investor C has invested $24,000 in total, and they ended up with 50. Investor A invested $48,000, but they walked away with $208,000 by the time they turned 65 there. So again, this is why it's so important to talk about investing early. The earlier you start, the better off you're going to be. That's allowing your money to work for you, right? We're already doing everything that we can every single day, working hard, putting in the hours, grinding every day to take care of our families, to take care of our loved ones, to reach our goals, to reach retirement, right? Let's start making this money work for us now at the same time, right? Because again, we're putting in all the elbow grease and all the work to make this money. So instead of just letting that money sit there in the bank account, let's let the money perform, right? And the way that we're going to do that again, primarily is through things like investments. It's one of the easiest ways that we're able to get started with everything there. Perfect. So just moving on to our next slide here. I apologize there. So when it comes to investments as well, just thinking about that, like Ethel mentioned earlier, some of the ways that are most commonly talked about is the 401k, right? Most employers will offer you a 401k. What does the 401k even mean, right? 401k essentially is an employer-sponsored retirement plan. That is something that your employer can get started for you. And like Ethel mentioned earlier, when it comes to the 401k, a lot of employers are going to offer some sort of dollar for dollar or percentage match into that account. So let's say, again, for simplicity's sake, that your employer is offering you a 5% match, right? So what that means is if you took 5% of your income and put it into that account, they will match and give you an additional 5% of your income for free, and they will also put that into that account. So you're getting essentially 10% put in every year, half coming from you, half coming from your employer. So free money there again. But here's the thing with the 401k that's really important to remember. With a traditional 401k, it's a great account to have because again, you're putting money away, you're getting free money from your employer there. But the thing that's really important to remember about it is this money, you're not paying tax today, but, and that's a big but here, you will have to pay full income tax on this money in the future. And that's the thing that we want people to remember, because again, that's something that we don't hear about. You know, your employer most of the times aren't going to come up to you and say, hey, Alex, how does this 401k work? Are you interested in learning about it? They're not going to tell you. They're just going to say, hey, you know what, Alex, you got this 401k, put money into it if you want. If you want to put it, we'll match you something. Maybe we will, maybe we won't, but we're not going to force you to get anything started there. It's all self-guided, right? So to put that number a little more conceptually, let's say that you had $1 million inside of your 401k, you get to 65, you retire, and now you're ready to pull that money out. When you do so, you're going to have to pay full income tax again there, right? And that income tax, even at today's tax rate, is pretty significant. So you would realistically walk away with about $600,000 from that full million, right? So you don't really have $1 million inside of that account because you don't truly walk away with $1 million there, right? Because you need to owe tax money on that. Because upfront, you've never paid tax on those dollars yet. One thing that's really important to talk about as well with the 401k, Roth IRA as well, they have the same kind of rules there. The difference here is that there's a minimum age to pull the money out of that account. That minimum age is 59 and a half years old. 59 and a half, so essentially 60 to just keep the number easy. If you touch the money early, you will get a slap on the wrist from the government, and that slap on the wrist is a 10% penalty on what you take out. On top of the amount you take out, you need to pay full income tax on it as well. So that's why we highly recommend, again, if we don't need to, if it's not an emergency, do not take the money out of your 401k until the future. Because after that minimum age of 59 and a half, let's say at 65, we retire, you can pull the money out of it. This time you won't have that 10% penalty, but unfortunately you still will have to pay the tax. So that's a really important thing to remember about the 401k. With the Roth IRA though, it's different because now the money you're putting into it, you don't pay taxes on that money, right? Because you've already paid tax up front. It's going to grow tax-free, but in the future, you get to pull that fully tax-free as well. So let's say you had $1 million in the 401k and you had $1 million in the Roth. The 401k, unfortunately, is getting taxed. You're walking away with about 600,000. With the Roth IRA, that $1 million is fully your $1 million. The IRS cannot touch this money ever again. You will not owe a single penny of tax on it. So to go back to that question earlier, that Roth IRA is a great way for people to start saving money on taxes, not necessarily for you today up front, but that's really important for future you, for future Alex, for future Mark, for future Ethel. In the future, that Roth IRA is going to really take care of you and make sure you are not owing any tax dollars there. Let's see here.
So how does that work? Say you're making, I don't know, $60,000 a year right now, so your tax rate at that income level would be applied to whatever you put into the Roth IRA today. And then say when you retire, you're only bringing in, I don't know, 25 grand. So, I mean, it's hard to, I mean, I've tried to compare the Roth with just a regular IRA. And so your tax rate with the lower income would be lower, but taxes always increase.
Yeah.
I don't know. But in general, tell us more about why you think the Roth makes more.
Yeah, so the Roth is really amazing because, again, the only thing better than free money, in my opinion, is tax-free money there. And tax-free is so important when we're thinking about just future us in the future, because, again, right, let's say that you were pulling $100,000 a year out of your 401k. Even at today's tax brackets, $100,000 of income means you're paying 24% tax, right? So that's 24%. That's $24,000 out of that 100K that you take out that immediately goes to the IRS, right? It's gone. You don't even get it. So realistically, you're walking away with about 75, right? So that's kind of crazy when you're thinking about your 401k there. But let's say you didn't have a 401k and you only had a Roth. If you took 100,000 out of your Roth, that money is fully yours. So you don't pay any taxes on that. You could take 100,000 out, you could take $1 million, you could take 2 million. And again, there's no tax liability there, right? So it's not to say that a 401k is a bad account to have. It's all about making sure you have the right blend of these different kind of accounts to give you as many tax benefits moving forward. So you get to be as strategic as possible when it comes to tax conversations and deciding how much you want to take out of 401k, how much you want to take out of Roth. And that all gives you, a generalized bubble that you get to kind of choose from, different buckets we get to pull out of to give ourselves, again, the best distribution strategy in the future with these different kind of retirement accounts there. But again, anything in Roth, you can take it out. It does not matter. You will not pay any taxes on that. Perfect. So I know we're
Alex, real quickly, I know I wanted to talk about how you make sure your contributions to your well, in this case, it was the thrift savings plan, Alex, and how you and I reallocated the contributions for two of our clients, because the funds that they were in were not doing much at all. Can you talk to that real quick?
Yeah. So when you're taking a look at different things like TSPs and 401ks, right? A lot of times your employer is going to just say, hey, you can get it started. You can open the account and they're going to let you start putting money into it. But they're not going to give you any guidance on where you need to put that money. So we've run into this with a lot of our clients on the nation that they're looking at their TSP and then they see it and it's like, oh my God, it's all held in cash, or it's fully invested in bonds and they're in their 30s, right? The strategy you use for your investments is just as important as investing outright, because there is such a thing as the wrong strategy. And if that strategy, especially as someone who's young, if that's all in very low risk assets like bonds and stuff like that, the money's not going to perform, unfortunately. Bonds do about 2 to 3% a year. It's just really not going to grow your money for you. So you want to use equity. You want to reallocate and rebalance that strategy to get you to where you need to be in the future there, right? And that unfortunately, at 2 to 3%, it's going to take a lot more than just 40 years of working in the job force to have $1 million saved away. You either need to save a ton more money, or you need to save for a lot longer at a lower interest rate. Versus if we're more aggressive, we can take less money invested up front, take advantage of compounding interest at a better rate, and you let that money perform for you even more there. There are a couple comments in the chat as well that pertain to those IRAs, and they're absolutely right. When it comes to the IRA, the Roth IRA specifically, it depends on how much money we're making. If we are making too much money there, over $140,000 a year under today's tax law, then yes, your ability to fund that account is affected, but it's not the end of the world. You can still fund it. It's just something called a backdoor Roth IRA. So you need to make sure that you're talking to the right kind of financial professionals to make sure we're still allowing you to take advantage of these different kinds of accounts there. Another comment as well that's important to mention is the Roth IRA, any gains that you get inside of that account, so any growth you get over time, also is not taxed. So dividends are not taxed, gains are not taxed, and then the overall amount in the future, again, is not taxed there too. Perfect. So I know we're coming up a little bit on time, so I want to just make sure we're getting through the rest of some of the things we have to talk about here today. One really important thing when it comes to just saving for the future and financial security is making sure that you are protected. Your income is protected, your loved ones are protected there. That's one of the best ways to start growing generational wealth, is to make sure we have the right kind of insurance in place there, and making sure that at the end of the day, we have the right kind of income protection too. Because if our income stops, unfortunately, life is not all about money, of course, but without income, that income really is the thing that drives our life forward. It allows us to pay our bills, allows us to fund our future there, allows us to buy the things that we want to buy. So that's why it's so important that we have the right kind of income protection in place, as well as the right kind of insurance program in place, because that's going to keep our baseline foundation okay, keeps our loved ones okay, keeps food on the table. And then from there, once we have the right kind of foundation, we're going to build the house on top of that, right? With the investments and all the really exciting stuff there. Perfect. So just moving through everything here now. So again, we kind of went through everything there. These are going to be, again, your main 5 actions to financial security. We want to save the right way. We want to spend the right way. We need to make sure that money is protected. We need to make sure that money is growing and performing for us. And then the last piece there that we didn't touch on too much was being able to give back in the future there. So it's a really important thing that a lot of people are thinking about. How do you want to make a difference in the world in the future? Are there any organizations you'd like to give to? Marc's talked a lot about this, being able to give back to the Navajo Nation and take care of the people back home, right? So again, whatever it is that is really important for you there, if it's something that you want to include into just your future planning, again, it's very important to factor all of these kind of things into your overall financial planning, and make sure we're taking it all into account, and we're accounting for all the different things that we're looking to do, with charities and stuff like that included as well. Perfect here. So I know that we're
Alex,
getting to end
do you want
here.
to just mention, you have, there's like a particular limit. I think you don't get a tax exemption. Maybe talk a little bit about tax exempt giving. If you have.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So when it comes to tax exempt giving there's a couple ways that you can start using that potentially even as a tax benefit as well, for people who, again, are, if you, let's say, for example, you're a very high income earner and you have a ton of money there. When you're thinking about your estate, right, and you're passing on properties and money and things like that to your children in the future after we pass away there, one of the ways that you can use charity as a way, again, just for estate planning purposes, is if you give a certain amount of money to charity. I don't know the exact percentages there, but if you give a certain amount, you can have that reduce your estate's overall amount and income that you have there. So when you're passing on those assets to your children in the future, you're passing it on and paying less taxes there. So charity tends to help with that. If you're given to charities, you can claim that on a tax return and say, hey, I gave X amount of dollars to like the Red Cross this year. That can be a tax reduction there for you as well. So it can help out upfront with tax exemptions, and then also long-term with estate planning that can help with your estate as well. But yeah, it's
Okay. Cool. Well, thanks so much for all of this information. And just, I mean, there are so many ways on the investment front to do that. Even as a small level investor, you can buy like a fraction. There's some companies that will allow you to buy a fraction of a stock. There are mutual funds where you just kind of select your tolerance for risk, and they automatically package your investments basically. And that's another, if you're risk averse, I am risk averse. And so I tend to, put my retirement investments into mutual funds. And yeah, so there are lots of different ways. If you want to do individual investments, that's also an option. But any additional points you want to add to the investment piece?
Yeah. One thing I would say about investments that's really important as well is this: it doesn't matter what level we start at today. You don't have to be someone who's putting $1 million a month into an account. We can start with, start at the level that makes you feel comfortable. So even if that's $50 a month, even if it's $25 a month, even if it's $10 a month, right? It doesn't really matter how much we start investing. The main thing is that we start, and we start to build up our savings habits over time. Because when it comes to financial planning and just growing our wealth, it's something that we talk about forever. It's a lifetime kind of process. It's not going to be snap our fingers one day and we're going to be totally fine, right? We're always going to be working on these kind of things. We're always going to be saving, always thinking about the future there. So whatever number makes the most sense for you, that's the number that's going to work for now, right? And then as we continue to work, as we continue to move up in our jobs and our careers and everything that we have going on, we want to just continue to scale the savings and everything like that to what works the best for you. Same thing with the investments. Like Ethel said, there are so many different ways to invest. You can do Robinhood accounts, right, just on your cell phone, and be able to start day trading stocks if you want to, just to start getting your feet wet. There's mutual funds, there's ETFs, right? There's so many ways that we can start helping to get money invested. So it's not one way that's going to be the end all be all, right? For most of my clients, we have individual stocks, we have mutual funds, we have ETFs, we have everything built in, and it's a blend of all of these different assets because we want your money to be diverse at the end of the day. We don't want to just put all of our eggs into Google stock, right? If you did something like that, if Google goes down, then all your money is gone, right? It's very irresponsible to do something like that. So we want to make sure we're taking the right steps. We're using portfolio diversity. We're managing portfolio risk. We're taking care of portfolio drift and everything like that. And we're choosing the right kind of investment vehicle for you given how aggressive or how conservative you want to be. So if you're someone who is super aggressive, an aggressive mutual fund can be a really great option for you. But if you're someone who's very conservative and very risk averse and you don't like taking risk, then using something like bonds or maybe even permanent life insurance would be a much better option for you there, because it's stuff that's a lot more steady, a lot less risk, a lot less volatility, right? So it really depends on what you have going on and what you feel comfortable with. And that's where seeking professional help too can be a really great option. If you don't know what direction to turn, again, there's always going to be people like Marc and I who are more than happy to talk you through these different kind of vehicles, explain all the ins and outs and how they all work, and give you the confidence to put the right foot forward and understand what direction you want to go. We really want to be able to show you that yellow brick road that you can follow to, again, help you reach your goals as quickly and efficiently as possible there.
So another question, briefly, I noticed in the slide about savings, there was a comment and it suggested at some point, there's an amount to keep liquid of your savings. And then at a certain point, you may want to put that into an investment so that you're generating more return on your dollar, since basically putting in a savings account is like digging a hole and storing it
Mm-hmm.
there, because it's not going to grow very quickly.
Mm-hmm. You're 100% right there. So like we were talking about earlier, that 6-month emergency fund, that's what we want to see inside of the bank account at all times. So that's 6 months of all of your expenses, right? So it's fund budget, fixed budget, savings budget. We want to see that inside of your emergency fund. So let's say that your monthly expenses were $3,000 a month, right? So 6 months of that's going to be $18,000. So at a bare minimum inside of your bank account, liquid as cash that's ready to go, it's easy to access. You just go to the bank and pull it out, is that 6-month emergency fund, right? That takes care of us in case anything happens. But any additional money on top of that, again, the bank account is one of the most inefficient places to put money. It's a safe place to put money, but that money really just sits there. 10,000 in the bank today, unfortunately, in 10 years is going to be $10,000 there too, plus some pennies, right? Because again, the interest is horrible. So it's important to have money in the bank, yes, but it's equally as important, again, to make sure that money's performing. So any additional money over that emergency fund can probably go somewhere else. And it doesn't even necessarily have to be the super aggressive places like stocks and mutual funds and stuff like that. You can put it into something that's guaranteed to grow, like life insurance, right? You can put it into bonds. Just as long as it's beating the rate of inflation at about 3% a year, that's just overall going to be in your best interest, instead of just leaving it all at the bank where it's just sitting there doing nothing and staying stagnant.
Well, thank you guys so much. This was so great. One of my New Year's resolutions is to get on top of my finances, my late fee or not really the fee, but the impact to my credit score was a wake-up call. And so I'm committed to having more financial discipline and just awareness this coming year. So this was really, really wonderful. And I'm hopeful that it was very informative to folks who are watching as well. Yeah, it was a fun conversation. So I want to thank you both for putting this together and taking time to do this. If you guys have any parting thoughts, we would love to hear from you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would just say again, it's not about how much we start with, it's about that we start, so it's a conversation to be had at the end of the day. It's going to take time to build financial security. It does not happen overnight. Even if you hit the lottery, it's not going to happen overnight, right? So again, just keep everything that we talked about in mind. Understand those goals, put pen to paper, write them down, really think about these goals. And again, that's going to really start the conversation with what we need to do to hit these goals. And then just start saving too. Start saving, start investing, get comfortable with the uncomfortable, because the only thing that it takes, again, is that we start. We don't have to chase after being a millionaire. Whatever number makes the most sense for you, we want to be able to help you hit it. So if that's being a millionaire, great. Let's work hard for it. If it's not, great, same thing. Let's work hard for it either way. So we want to make sure that you're hitting all of your goals regardless of what they are. And just, again, time and consistency is the majority of the things that we need to hit these goals. And again, if there's any questions, seek out professional help. There's financial institutions. They're always going to be out there. If you want to talk to Marc and I, absolutely feel free to reach out. We're more than happy to answer any questions and to be able to work with any people out there. And then again, don't be scared to ask questions there, because that's what we're here for. We're here to really provide the best advice and pass on this knowledge, because it's not taught anywhere else. So again, utilize the resources that you have available to you. And again, our goals are really to make sure we're taking care of everyone and giving back to the community there. And I appreciate everyone taking the time to meet with us here today. And I'll pass it off to Marc now.
Yeah, yes, thank you, Ethel, for just this opportunity. It's like I said earlier, just giving back to the community, providing the financial literacy, just to and that moving on to other parts, other generations, and it's just what we need in the community to bring us up, level us up, basically. Alex and I say that all the time, leveling up and stuff. But that's the key, is this. I remember financial literacy, or not having financial literacy, and just arguing all the time about finances, like, hey, after 2017, seeking my financial advisor, it didn't have to be like that anymore. We didn't have to argue about this anymore. When you lay everything out in black and white, and not only conceptually, and that's what we do as financial advisors, lay everything out in black and white and allow our clients to, to make that decision, but that's what we're for. So again, thank you for this great opportunity. And, I'll turn it back over to you, Ethel.
Okay, great. Well, awesome, guys. Thank you so much. And thank you to our viewers. I hope you are all on the path to a stronger financial position as a result of this presentation. And I feel like, what happened for me during this presentation is I started to brainstorm other presentations that we need. Like, we've been getting a lot of questions about taxes, especially how that relates to retirement. There's the question on charitable giving. And so I definitely want to do a future presentation on that. We've had a discussion previously with someone who secured their home site lease on Navajo Nation. We didn't have a chance to talk about real estate and sort of buying a home versus renting. So I feel like this presentation has inspired some ideas for some additional future presentations that we could do that can help strengthen folks' financial positions, because that's a big part of our goal. We as an organization, we started as a direct relief organization, trying to just protect our community from COVID. But with the amazing group of women leaders, we were always very mindful of why our community was in this vulnerable position and the things that need to be done to eliminate those vulnerabilities in the future. And of course, one of those is lack of access to capital for Indian country and Indian people, right? And lack of wealth in our communities. Even though we are the original landlords of this country, and we should not be the poorest people in this country. We should be getting our regular rental payments, and we should really be the greatest bastions of wealth in this nation. And so, how do we get to that point? How do we make sure families have enough money to put food on their tables? That improves health outcomes for the family, making the family more pandemic proof. It helps improve educational outcomes for the children, and it creates stronger human capital in our communities, and that leads to economic development and growth. And overall, how do we strengthen our community and make sure that we have a better future? Because the Dene future is here on our homelands. And we want that to be a bright future where our people are not vulnerable to things like COVID in a disproportionate manner, as we've seen in recent history. So we love having this conversation about wealth building, and we want to advance that as much as we can. And so thank you guys so much, and let's definitely chat. Maybe there are some future presentations that you all could provide to our listeners. And I just want to thank you both, and also Marc, you just have such an inspiring story. I know we have so many of our young people who serve in the military. About 25% of Native Americans enlist in the military. And so I think it's great to have our young people listening who are going down that path to see the opportunity for a career in the military, and then also the opportunity to transition to something really exciting and fun, like what you're doing with Northwestern Mutual, and the opportunity to live in a really beautiful place like San Francisco. So this is very, very inspiring. And also just hearing the story of your mother, I'd love to talk to her and hear about her path to what sounds like a really fun job. So thank you guys so much for sharing with us and giving your time very generously. And we will be in contact soon. So have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Ethel, for helping us set us up. Mihail as well. We appreciate both of you. And thank you again to everyone who decided to tune in today. And again, we're happy to answer any questions at any point in time there for everyone. And everyone stay safe and healthy. And let's make 2022 a great year.
Awesome. Wonderful.
Thank you.
Should we put your email addresses in the chat so folks can get in touch with you, or how should folks get in touch with you if they'd like to speak?
Absolutely. I'm going to go ahead and put my email address right now in the chat, Marc, if you could do that as well. And I'll include my personal cell phone number as well. So feel free to reach out via email or phone, and you'll be able to contact Marc and I through either method, whatever works best for our listeners here today.
Awesome. Fantastic. Wow. Very bold, giving your personal cell phone number.
Hey, no questions are bad questions. So happy to help wherever we can.
Excellent. Well, I think that gives you a sense for the commitment of this team. So wonderful. I'll make sure to migrate that to the Facebook live feed so our viewers have that information. So everyone have a wonderful day. And thank you so much to our guests.
All righty. Thank you again.
Thank you again. Bye.
Take care.
On that.